back to the tangent. We are actually going to do a quick reintroduction of a couple people. We're going to do a reshuffle in our group. Some people have asked for a little bit of time off. Devin is going to take a little bit of time to himself. He felt that he just needed some time. So
he's no longer with us.
He will be back. I told him the door's always open, so he might actually show up periodically.
Yeah, we conquered death. It's cool.
So we're going to replace them with a couple of people that I feel really add to the podcast when they're here, and when they are here.
I'm here mentally, but not. Physically, but not mentally.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we have the husband-wife team of the Hucks, otherwise known as Katie and Nick.
Hello.
We also have Tim.
Yeah, I'm here.
And myself, James. I know. I'm sorry for the long introduction. I just wanted to get some basic stuff out on the table, and to let you know that there might not be some people on the cast for a while. So, the last couple of weeks we've had a really large room of a lot of people, and it gets a little hectic in here when we do that, so we're cutting it back down to 4 again. Today we're going to talk about sci-fi, just in general. I know it's a very, very broad topic. We could do all kinds of stuff, from books to TV shows to movies. But I'm going to start with something that has probably been discussed 100 times, is those obscure sci-fi TV shows that should have made it, but didn't. And we're going to start with one of my favorites, and I wish it would have gotten a couple more seasons. It's Firefly.
Yes.
We loved Firefly.
So,
Firefly is one of those shows that I've heard very few people who have actually watched it say that they didn't want more. Like, I mean, I've heard 1 or 2 people who have watched it say it was like, it was okay. And then literally everyone else who's watched it is just offended that the show ended.
I really feel like Firefly, personally, if you look like some of the TV shows today, like The Mandalorian, Picard, that had a little bit more of a branding, I felt like, in my personal opinion, that show was ahead of its time for how it did it, because it did it in a very similar format, and I think it was just as good, if not better, in some cases.
he had something. It was Joss, right?
Yes.
Joss Whedon, yeah.
Joss Whedon.
So Joss had something, and he still has that something, because he's done a lot of the Avengers movies, a lot of the Marvel MCU movies. He has something that not everybody has, and this is this huge creative brain.
Right.
That knows how to put stories together to keep people wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
And with a twist, usually.
And he likes to throw twists in, which is okay, which is also a good way to keep people drawn in, is by throwing in twists.
Mm-hmm.
Bad Wolf.
But, I don't know why that just came up.
Quit.
Because it had nothing to do with Joss Whedon. But anyway.
I'll keep him in control, guys. Don't worry.
I don't think that's possible.
Anyway, but back to Joss. He was one of those very super creative people that not a lot of people understood. And I think he got a bad rap early, and I don't even remember why they canceled the show.
Honestly, they canceled the show because it wasn't getting very good ratings at the time, but it was not in a very good time slot. When they eventually put it back into syndication and had a slightly better time slot, that's when it got popular. And I mean,
how did it get into syndication? It only had 1 season, right? It only had the 1 season.
Yeah, you do reruns.
Yeah, but most times things. Okay, I guess it had to have been that good for them to want to rerun it again.
Yeah,
but
a lot of
and also the Sci-Fi Channel ended up buying the rights to run the reruns.
Oh, okay. Because a lot of shows don't even get put into what they consider syndication until like 3 seasons in.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think that maybe, possibly, and again, this is just my assumption of it, because I haven't seen Firefly in years.
Same.
And the first time that I saw it, I believe either you or Tim,
It was probably Tim.
It was probably Tim.
It was.
It was.
Introduced me to it, and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. There's only one season of this, I was super pissed.
One season that's only half of the length that the original plan for the first season was.
Right, and then they came up with the movie, didn't they?
And then they came up with a movie. 'Cause the original plan for season 1, I think, was 26 episodes long, and they ended up with like 13 or something.
Do you think
Right.
that
And
show?
I also think that maybe it could have been budget cuts. Possibly, because I think, wasn't the show aired on Fox?
It was, yeah.
And maybe it could have been...
Fox was notorious for canceling shows at that time too. So.
Right. And I think
Like,
that
they got made fun of on Family Guy for it because like it was the third time that Family Guy got back on air.
Yes.
So they'd been canceled twice.
Yeah.
And one of their first episodes back, it might have been the first episode back, they made fun of Fox for the huge list of shows that they had canceled, and Firefly was one of them.
Right.
They just like the fine shows of Fox or the fine entertainment that Fox is putting out, including all these shows, and it was just a giant list of all the shows they canceled.
Right. But I remember watching the first season and watching the season finale of that show, and just I love the entire show. It was incredible, and I remember watching the movie shortly after that too, because I had to watch it in order.
Yes.
And
yeah, the movie was Joss's way.
Serenity.
Yeah, Serenity.
Yes.
The movie, from what I understood, was Joss's way to finish up, so
Right.
that it had a completion
It's
because
some kind of ending.
Right.
because he wasn't able to make a completion in his actual TV show. So he
Right.
created the movie to basically to end it, to give fans a like, okay, we have a clear-cut ending
Right.
to this, we're done.
And
Yeah.
Firefly was, and because of the cancellation of Firefly, I think that's why, and you're right, that's why Joss Whedon, excuse me.
I know, that's hard.
I almost said Josh. Sorry.
J-name.
Made the movie was because of that. Was because he was like, oh, okay.
Well, he was almost pressured into it by the fans, because the fans were like, the people who really got into it were like, we need an ending, it was canceled, blah, 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 blah. There's huge petitions to try to get it put back on air, and nobody was taking, none of this, Joss was willing to, but he wanted certain things, because he's kind of like that. Mm-hmm. He wasn't getting what he wanted, nobody was willing to pick it up, and he's like, I'll make a movie. They got the green light for the movie, and he cleared it all up.
Can I ask a question? How many years in between the TV show ending and the movie happening? What was the time gap in there?
You mean the time jump?
Well,
Yeah, the time jump.
The time jump from the show to the movie is like 3 months.
well,
not
In real time.
In real time.
In real time?
IRL.
Oh, that was 3-4 years?
Because I felt
Right.
like... Okay, hear me out.
I can
I'm
look it
gonna
up.
Well-
I'm going to go on a tangent about this a little bit. I feel like, personally, if that show would have been a streaming exclusive, like, say, on Netflix or Prime, it would have
You mean like if the show was made like a decade and a half after it was?
Yeah, it would have done a lot better. And it would have been on a lot
it
longer.
may not have been, though. because
Well,
it-
you're right. And it might not have been as good either.
But here's the thing: is
I can't think of any popular streaming show that's. Oh wait, Altered Carbon is probably the only popular streaming show that's around right now. And Altered Carbon and Firefly are very different shows.
What's Altered Carbon?
I've never heard of Altered Carbon. Enlighten me.
Altered Carbon is based off of a book. The whole premise of the series is humanity has achieved pseudo immortality, every person has something implanted in the top of their spinal cord called the stack. And the stack holds literally all of your memories and personality and everything that you are. And so you can die, your body can die, and they call it a sleeve. And they can take your stack, put it in a new sleeve, and you're back.
Kind of like a hard drive.
So if you're rich enough, you can buy custom-made clone sleeves that look however the hell you want, and you can go around and just be a rich person and have infinite numbers of bodies. Like the whole premise of the first season is there's a rich guy who's trying to figure out what happened to his system because there's a segment of time that he can't remember, but his brain automatically gets backed up to a satellite every night. So even if his stack gets destroyed, they can just re-download it to a new stack, and he has an army of sleeves that all look like him. So he's always going to be him, but there's a segment of like an hour that he can't remember from one night, and he hires this guy who's some uber badass commando that he had to pay a judge or something to let out of prison to figure out where that hour went.
I was gonna say, I always read it. I don't actually. I didn't read the book or watch the show, but I always is more of a mystery murder.
There is
murder.
There is a murder
TV
mystery
show
going on at the same time that they're doing essentially a like the thing that all sci-fi does, which is basically asking big questions, big future questions, and they're trying to figure out like what makes a human a human.
That's some deep stuff.
Yeah. So they're trying to figure out like because there's a whole like cult of people in this future that they refuse to be re-sleeved, like it's against their religion because they think that your first stack and your first body, that's where your soul is, and if you get re-sleeved then you can't go to heaven or something. And it's a lot of interactions between people who think like that and people who are very reckless with their sleeves, and sort of like it's a really interesting show. It is not a kid-friendly show. It is a very adult.
It is.
A very adult.
It is
sci-fi.
on Netflix. It's a Netflix original,
and I don't. The second season and a mid-season animated season is out. So you have season 1, season 1.5, and season 2 are out right now.
So I don't get your comparison and why you're saying that that's the only.
I can't think of another streaming popular sci-fi show right now.
Oh man!
I don't know. We talked about it on this podcast.
The Mandalorian.
No.
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things is not sci-fi.
It's kind of in the sci-fi.
Umbrella Academy.
Okay. No, none of these things are sci-fi.
I mean,
What?
I don't-
Well, what do you consider to be sci-fi?
Should we define sci-fi first?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you consider to be
more
sci-fi?
like futuristic sci-fi, like
Star Trek is sci-fi. 'Cause sci-fi generally has to do with existentialism and answering questions about the future.
Right.
It's Stranger Things isn't classified as sci-fi because it doesn't ask any questions, it tells a narrative.
Okay. That makes sense.
I'm trying to think of other ones because there's a bunch. There's a bunch on.
Now the thing is, there are new Star Treks that are out, but
No, I'm not even talking about
they're
those.
not doing.
I'm just trying to
terribly
think of. I'm just trying to think of Netflix because they have Lost in Space, which I consider sci-fi,
great. Oh, there is a new Lost in Space.
and it's
Oh,
not.
that's right,
There,
is.
it is not bad. It's 2 seasons in. I haven't watched the second season, but the first season, the bits and pieces of the first season that I have seen, isn't a bad show.
So it was something I wanted to get into. I completely forgot that it was out, but the fact that I forgot that it's out,
Yeah, it kind of throws it.
it leads me to ask, is it popular? And it might
Right.
be. It might
Right.
just be a thing that I missed.
Right.
And the
But-
thing is, though, Tim, my thing is that maybe it wasn't popular enough that it didn't quite get your attention.
Right.
Well, another sci-fi show that's on HBO is the H.P. Lovecraft
That's not
Lovecraft
sci-fi. That's
Country?
more of a horror.
Lovecraft Country is very not sci-fi. Lovecraft Country is eldritch horror.
Oh, got it.
So I think that's kind of an interesting, because I didn't even think to try and answer the question of what is sci-fi before we started.
Well, so okay,
Right.
for me, sci-fi has a broader definition than what you said, but I do get why you're throwing it into a more narrow means, which only makes sense. Anything for me, sci-fi is so broad in the sense that anything that is not normal to everyday life, and the extension of that is science fiction, which is what sci-fi stands for, is science fiction. Anything that has a scientific reason to not be true in real life.
Okay. Now,
Okay.
there is some argument to that, but the thing is, like stuff like Star Wars doesn't generally get lumped in with sci-fi because technically it's space fantasy or space opera, and those things are not technically sci-fi because it's telling a narrative.
Well, hold on. See, again, though, that's your definition of sci-fi.
This is okay. I'm not going to go with this is my definition of sci-fi. This is the definition of sci-fi when it comes to like classifying genres like books and movies and TV shows.
I mean, you're talking about something really broad.
That's not me.
Because when I look up anything in the sci-fi genre, books are going to be the ones that I look up more than anything else. Guess what's one of the first books that pops up when I look up in the sci-fi genre? Think about it. What do you think it is?
Ender's Game.
It's a freaking Star Wars book. And you're trying to tell me that Star Wars is not in the sci-fi genre.
Because books get classified as sci-fi fantasy or literature. Sci-fi and fantasy are not the same genre, but they get lumped together because it's easier to organize a bookstore that way.
Okay, I just pulled up the definition right here from the all-knowing Oracle Google. Science fiction definition: a genre of speculative fiction that typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science, technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universes, and extraterrestrial life. That's pretty broad.
And that takes a lot of your narrow definition and broadens it to where I'm at.
I agree.
Okay.
But, I mean...
Okay.
Maybe it's more of your, possibly maybe your preferred. Like,
But
when I think
again-
of sci-fi, like, I don't know if anyone knows or not. They're bringing the X-Files back, apparently, or they did. I don't know how it's doing.
They did.
That's
They brought it back
streaming.
for a minute, and then I heard it went away, and then it's coming back, or I don't...
It did come back for like a season or something.
But
it didn't do
Rick
so
and
well.
Morty's also apparently one, I guess, too. I don't really watch that show, but apparently it's really popular nowadays.
Okay, like a lot of these things I can classify better in other genres, which is one of the things that I'm sort of getting into. Like Rick and Morty is, I wouldn't classify as sci-fi because I can more easily classify it as comedy or nihilistic comedy specifically.
I'm with you on that one.
See, I look at
And
stuff like
like
that.
the thing like X-Files, I always thought of X-Files as being more of a light horror as opposed to being a sci-fi.
Yeah, it's meta. Yeah,
true.
I can see that.
Or like you have to classify it into a double genre, which
Thank
is
you.
sci-fi
I wanted
horror.
was going to say that. Like Rick and Morty could be a sci-fi animation comedy.
So then here's my real question, is where do you lump Back to the Future?
Back to the Future has light sci-fi elements because it does ask questions of, like, should you be able to have the power to mess with things in time like Biff does?
Correct.
But technically Doc has that power as well. He just doesn't use it for that. But they answer, they try and answer the question of should he have it at all? And
what happened?
Yeah, and at the near the end of the second Back to the Future, he promises to destroy the time machine because he doesn't think anyone should have that power. That's that is asking those hard sci-fi questions. It's just the rest of it is light sci-fi.
Yeah, because it's very dramatic. It's like a sci-fi drama / comedy because it has its comical moments, but most dramas have a comical moment. So, wow. That's not where I expected that to go. I thought we were going to end up talking about Star Trek and Stargate SG-1.
A lot of
that's
sci-fi,
all good, though.
A lot of sci-fi comes from things like Asimov's books, like the iRobots of the world, and do androids dream of electric sheep and junk like that.
Well,
I heard that was supposed to be a damn good book.
It is.
My introduction into sci-fi, I never really grew up with sci-fi stuff that I can remember off the top of my head.
We were entrenched. I was entrenched in it my whole life.
I didn't
Me
grow
too.
up. I didn't grow up with Star Trek. I didn't grow up with Well, I did kind of grow up with Star Wars. I was kind of late to the game in that, but I didn't really grow up with that kind of genre because that's just not what I was into or my parents were into or whatever it may be. I know I'm a girl, but
the audience might not.
That does not mean that I wouldn't be into sci-fi though. Girls
But
would be into sci-fi too.
the higher percentage of people in the sci-fi world that really have gotten into it, even at a younger age,
are men.
Mostly guys.
Right, and that's
especially when you
understandable.
get into like hard sci-fi, like
Yeah.
when the closer you get to my rather specific definition of sci-fi,
Right.
the more people consider it hard sci-fi.
Right.
So things like Ender's Game, like I mentioned earlier.
Ender's Game's a good
Ender's
series.
Game is literally like the entire series of the Ender books is just a series of existential like transhumanist questions of like and trying to figure out like non-human species and how like do they have humanity and should we treat them like people and
Right. But
So back into
and then
the,
also framing war and the ethics of child soldiers. But
let me. But so my first real introduction into sci-fi, if I were to really pinpoint it, and maybe it can be misconstrued, maybe I don't know, but my first real introduction into sci-fi was through you two, Tim and James, through Doctor Who, which, for those of you who do not know, is a show on the BBC that is I don't want to say very popular, but it is a semi-popular show. It exploded more in the more 2010s when David Tennant was on it and that sort of era. For how long was he on the show for?
he was on the show
3
for
years.
3 seasons.
Yeah. So
It ended up being like 4 years, but it was 3 seasons.
So for those who know David Tennant, know that he was on he was the Doctor Who for for the seasons that he was that Tim just mentioned, and then Matt Smith took over, and David Capaldi, etc., etc.
she missed one of the better ones.
Who?
The very first one that came back into the Americas before Tennant is Eccleston.
Oh yes, Eccleston. Yes, you're right. Yes.
So Eccleston was the first. Okay, so we can get into Doctor Who, which is fine because that actually puts us back on topic. Doctor Who is another one of those sci-fi shows
Yes.
that has stemmed years, and when I say years, I mean decades.
Since the 60s,
Decades. So
50s, even.
BBC back in the 50s or 60s had that show. Later, when I was growing up, they would replay them on PBS.
Yeah, they originally pitched Doctor Who as a educational program.
Right. I first got introduced to
Which is
it
really weird, but yeah.
was when it's not on Netflix anymore that I know of.
No, it's on. You can find it I thought it might be off of there now, but it was on Prime for a minute.
But I first got introduced to it when it was on Netflix through, again, Tim and James. And
Yep, I remember that.
I first got introduced to it with the renewal of it when it first came around again back in like the 2010s. somewhere around there, maybe even before then.
I think the first season was 07 or 08.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's when I got introduced to Christopher Eccleston and him. And I thought that he was great, and he only lasted the one season, which was really sad. And I thought that he was really good, but then I got introduced to the wonderful, yummy David Tennant, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm in. And that's when I fell in love with the show and have been ever since.
What do you want to say?
So I was actually I want to ask you two, because I don't actually know what was your first introduction to sci-fi, but before I do that, for me, I want to talk about mine as well, since you did, was actually Aliens, Terminator 2, and because we didn't have cable TV and it was the only channel I could get and I fell in love with it, was Star Trek: The Next Generation. But
Okay.
So- Terminator, I don't know, would be considered to be sci-fi though.
No, because you have a lot of even hard sci-fi type questions in there, mostly about time travel and fate and like, can you change time by going? Like, can you break time loops? Can you
Terminator 2
Can
puts
you
out-
can you get around paradox and jump
Yeah,
like
Okay.
Terminator 2 does a big
which
introduction to time and time paradoxes and
Really?
no
Oh,
fate, no
okay.
fate but what you make.
really
Okay.
only
Because
the
if
first
you-
two only the first
Well,
two
then I
really
can
go
do
into
it.
that in any kind of organized manner. After the first two, it just gets hectic and crazy and
Yeah,
Right.
and if you don't
like
follow
from
it,
there
you're
I don't
lost.
consider it sci-fi anymore because again
It just
they
became an
abandoned
action-
all the science.
What's that action schlock that you use?
Yeah, it's action schlock. They abandoned all the science and they just went with trying to tell a narrative, and the narrative honestly isn't very good. But the first two Terminators, I'd be willing to stick those in at the very least light sci-fi, if not hard sci-fi.
can I say,
But
sorry.
Aliens, I'd be less likely to be able to lump into sci-fi. It's really more horror. It's like I've never seen anyone classified as anything other than horror.
I'm talking about the second one, which I always thought was more horror action based.
The second one is just an action movie.
I like that.
So
It's-
scientifically, yes, because there's science, there's space travel,
So
there's an
the-
alien.
The first one
So
I would consider
is
horror.
there-
The second one I would consider action. The third one I would consider bad.
I-
And the fourth I would consider worse.
That's about where you are.
I agree, Tim. I'm going to say though that I still disagree with your classification. I'm with James on this one, and the fact that I think that you kind of have to.
Now you
apply
can
multiple
you can
genres.
cross genres, but the thing is, at the end of the day, the fact that they're in space is literally just a setting. They
True.
could they could have the thinged that and set them in Antarctica, and it's the exact same movie. Like your set piecing isn't like it's the reason
Okay,
why I have a hard time thinking of The Walking Dead as horror, because zombies are just a set piece. There's nothing scary about The Walking Dead.
No,
No, it's more scary about what's going to happen to the characters.
It's more of
It's
a
a drama.
It's a very much so a drama.
Like the zombies are a set piece.
Yeah.
So, okay, I do see where Nick is coming from, but I see more where Tim is coming from in Alien. And the fact that I do see that space travel, aliens, extraterrestrial life, I can see that as wanting to be sci-fi. But if you really rewatch the first movie, it was set up to be a straight-up horror flick.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't call The Thing sci-fi, but the monster in it is an alien.
So...
Like,
Tim can go ahead and do his first introduction to sci-fi. And
honestly, I couldn't tell you what my first introduction to sci-fi was. I can't remember at all.
which is really weird. So here's the weird thing is that in our household, and I don't understand how Tim never picked up on this, but he was also quite a bit younger than me and our older brother.
Still am.
So maybe he didn't pick up when we were really big into it, but our father was huge into Star Trek.
He was.
Really?
So my first real big introduction
And
is
he was mostly
Buck
big into the original.
Rogers, the original Star Trek, We did Battlestar Galactica, the original Battlestar Galactica.
Oh wow.
We did a lot of that stuff. Dad was huge into sci-fi, old school sci-fi. What I consider.
And the thing is, I remember being a kid and enjoying some of the original Star Trek. Like I had VHS tapes of the original Star Trek episodes.
Right. Now, my thing is this. I love Star Trek. I also love Star Wars. I have this weird thing about Star Trek that I have seen every original episode. I've seen Star Trek's Next Generation at least 4 times all the way through. I've seen
And I see there's
Deep Space Nine at least once through, Voyager at least 2 times through.
Wow.
I've seen I've watched Enterprise, I've watched
See, I've tried to watch
Discovery, I've watched
Picard.
Isn't there a
Picard.
new one too? The lower levels or something like
The
that?
lower levels is an animated thing that they are literally out to make fun of basic Star Trek.
And honestly,
Schlock.
what they're trying to do is they're trying to be the Orville, but doing it bad.
So basically, what it is that everything that Star Trek does, like, oh shoot, I'm wearing red today, that means I'm gonna die.
Well, unless you're
So it's
Commander
the
Riker.
basic stuff that is like
Well, that's because,
that is like
okay,
the comedy stuff that we've
red,
always
the red
put
shirt
out.
thing comes from the original. They changed what the colored shirts mean in Next Generation, so it didn't like
The
it was a completely
original-
different thing.
But so they're just basically
the
what
red,
the
red
lower
shirts were
decks.
what, security in original and
Yes.
what was
Security and
security's color?
engineering. Blue was the medical.
What was security in Next Gen?
Security was orange, wasn't it?
Yellow.
Yellow.
Yeah, the yellowish.
They used the yellow.
Dark yellow.
But red became
blue
something
was-
else.
blue
red,
was-
red was command, wasn't it? It was
Yes.
officers.
Not all officers, but most of the officers did wear red. So blue was like scientific medical. So anything to do with science or
Yeah, they what they
medical or plants or stuff like that. The investigative side.
like Deanna Troy, she was.
She wore blue, but she's
they
gray
swapped security and command's colors from original to Next Gen. Basically.
I never noticed that. Now that you think about, you bring that up,
because. But the other thing is that the engineers also wore yellow. Anybody that did technical work wore yellow, but the
Navigation.
security did yellow. When you look at the 2 people that ran the, so color was not as meaningful
Yeah.
in what they did. Sometimes it meant rank, sometimes it didn't, sometimes it did. But Commander Data, Lieutenant Commander Data, he started out as a commander, he went into lieutenant commander, but he was an officer, but he wore yellow through the whole thing. He didn't even jump into a red suit until later, and you only see him in the red suit once or twice later on.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. That was my introduction to Star Trek. So, Star Trek to me was one of those... Now, the things that I didn't like about Star Trek...
The thing is, I couldn't... I tried to get into Next Gen because I liked original. But the thing is, when I try and watch it, I try and watch it the way I do everything. I try to watch it just straight up all the way through. And that first season is not friendly to start. Like,
Really?
if you don't already care about the Next Generation, trying to start in season 1 is not the best place to do it.
Season one was very gritty.
Yeah, and it sort of dumps you in and goes, you better care about the plot because we're not going to try and make you care about the characters.
Well, I mean, the very first 2 episodes is key to the end of the season. So it all circles back around.
Is it?
Yeah.
I never actually finished the season.
So Q becomes big, but Q has his own motion stuff throughout. But do you remember the first episode? They got put on trial. The first 2 episodes.
No, it's been a while since the last time I tried. I've tried
something
no less than 3
it's
times.
something at Farpoint. Something at Farpoint Station, and Farpoint Station is they find a lot of weird stuff that happens at Farpoint Station. Like, they go down to this like, I can't think of the name, but like an open market.
Yeah.
In the station, and somebody grabs some fabric and says, "Oh, this would look really good in this color." And then she goes to put the fabric down, and what does she see? That same exact fabric in the color she wanted. So they come to find out that Farpoint Station is alive.
Okay.
And is creating everything that these people want. That's how Farpoint became. So the big key is that they're on trial to determine what life is and what life is important and what life isn't. The Q continuum. It's really hard to explain. You almost have to watch it again to understand. But there's a lot of
it's hard sci-fi right from the get.
Correct.
But they're putting people on trial that you don't care about yet.
Correct.
So that's what I'm saying is it's not friendly to new watchers.
But the thing is it
like
it
I've seen episodes randomly. Like Emily has like been watching like The Next Generation when I come over to, like hang out with her or Nick or Wesley or whatever, and there'll be random episodes on, and some of them are pretty good.
Some of them are fantastic,
but like they're like 5, 6, 7 seasons in, and there's no way that me trying to watch it all the way through am I ever going to get there. Because,
you could
because I can't get past season 1 because I don't give a damn about any of these people.
You could. The thing is that it helped. So for me, it was really weird when I first got into Next Generation. I didn't catch season 1. I didn't get into Next Generation until season 3.
When did they bring Data in?
Data's always been there.
Oh, okay.
So season 3, things are really cool, and that was one of my very first seasons I ever watched. But when I was able to watch it, it was in syndication, so it was on channel 11. It'd be on 2 episodes at night from like 8 to 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So they'd run 2 episodes back to back, and then a lot of times they wouldn't run them in order. So sometimes I'd miss some, or sometimes I wouldn't, and I'd watch what I could. I never really got to see them straight through, and then when they put it on Netflix, it was like, oh well, crap, let's do this. I did it. I've done it twice through already.
Wow.
I do want to watch Star Trek, so I can get into it.
So
I can
to help. Here's what I want you to do.
Maybe we should start in season 3.
Because I'm a noob.
Star Trek: The Next Generation is good. Star Trek DS9 super slow.
Yeah.
But Star Trek Voyager
does not bode well because that would be my description of The Next Generation.
What?
Is that Patrick Stewart?
I mean, it depends on the episode, really.
Season 1
Next
again.
Generation.
I can't get through season 1.
Should I watch William Shatner one?
Like
you can. There's only like 90 episodes.
That's all?
That's not terrible.
Really?
Yeah, 90 something. It's like only 3 seasons.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I've never actually sat down and watched all of it.
It's not that many seasons. They didn't do it, but the thing is that it seemed like a lot because they kept replaying the same ones over and over.
Oh, yeah.
So it was on for a long, long.
I remember the
Should I start with the Shatner era or
you can skip it. Personally, in my personal, the issue that you're going to come across is when it comes to the movies.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Yes.
So, if you're not going to watch the actual show, at least watch the 5 or 6 movies with the Shatners.
Okay.
Yes,
they get
it is important. You have to watch the William Shatner movies.
Are you done?
I don't know why you were moving your arms.
I don't understand why you're moving. I don't understand why you're moving your arms, but you had the cadence down really good.
Well, at least he has that. Okay.
The movies.
Really?
I wish we were doing this on video so you guys could have seen how he was moving
Yes,
his freaking arms.
He was flapping
It made 0 sense.
As my friend Mr.
He
Spock would
was
say,
flapping
it would
them
be
about.
highly illogical.
So you'll get enough from watching the movies, but I'm going to tell you right now, even the movies are tough. The first 2 or 3 are very tough because they're very old. They're very old production. They're very...
The first one is tough because it's not terribly good.
No, it's
They
not.
do a lot of lingering shots on things like the ship. Like, God, when they first do that pan over of the ship, it's what, like 2 minutes?
Oh, it's forever long. They've actually made fun of that in other movies on how long that pan over for that ship
Did they do
is.
that on Spaceballs too?
Yeah.
That's another one that we should bring up. Spaceballs.
We'll get there in a minute. So, like I said, if you could watch the movies at least, and then get into the Next Generation. But seriously, get through the first season. Pretend like you know who these characters are, and you love them, because they do a lot of things that they just assume that you're already in love with who these characters are.
The thing is, season 1 is again difficult for that because, especially at the beginning of season 1. How am I supposed to love these characters when even Picard wants to like beat Wesley Crusher to death with a hammer? Like,
Well, okay,
he spends the first part of that season just trashing that kid. Like,
okay, so there's another thing that gets brought up a lot about Picard. Picard does not do well with children. It's not that he dislikes children; he just doesn't always know how to act around them.
and thus people assume he dislikes children because he spends most of his time yelling at them.
Correct.
And
Yeah, that's
and
just
saying
There
things like,
is
"I don't
one-
like you."
There is one of my favorite
I love Patrick
episodes.
Stewart,
There is
though.
one of my
He's
favorite
cool.com.
episodes involves him and 3 kids, and they get stuck in an elevator together through the whole episode.
How
It
many
is
of
one
the
of my best.
kids are still alive?
I
when
love
All
they-
3 of them
Stewart.
make it out alive. All 3 of them make it out alive. But it's one of my favorite episodes because it involves how something happens to the ship and he gets stuck on the turbo lift, and there's like no power in the ship, so nobody can talk to anybody else. So there's like all these people trying to fix the problem in different areas of the ship. And he just happens to be the captain who should be trying to figure out how to solve a problem. His problem is that he has a broken ankle and they can't move. So they got to try to get out of this turbo lift because the turbo lift brakes are failing so that it can't stay where it's at, so it's just going to drop.
Yeah.
So they got to figure out how to get out of the turbo lift, but he's with a little kid. I mean, he's maybe 7 or 8. And then he's got maybe a 10-year-old, and then he's got a girl that's maybe 14.
I never saw this one.
And like they're stuck in this turbo lift, and they got to get up and out. So they find a way up and out, and he ends up trying to figure out the best ways to handle being around the kids, and it helps a lot. So here's the thing about Star Trek: The Next Generation, is that they play the long game when it comes to background stories of their characters.
Character development.
Of
Yeah.
the character development. So they do the long play. So their whole first season isn't about character building. The character building comes through the whole other 9 or 10 seasons that they have. I don't remember how many seasons there are.
Quite a few.
There's a lot. But the
I
character
think it's 36
no, it's not that many.
because I just look at the show and I go, "This is unimaginably long."
it is very
It is.
long. But they do a lot of
And
excess
every
character
season has like 116 episodes.
Later on in the seasons, they have like stories that build to this and build to that, but they do filler episodes that give you more background on certain characters. Sometimes they run a full episode where you're following a certain character around for their whole day,
Right.
and they're
But
not
the
main
thing is,
characters.
like I'm not asking for like a whole lot. Like if you go back to like Firefly, like the first 5 minutes of Firefly are just give you a small character introduction. You don't know exactly who these people are,
Right.
but you get them, in the war, and Captain, Mal being all, happy-go-lucky and we're gonna win this thing, and then they lose, and then you have some kind of connection to these characters now, and then you do the time jump forward, and you get to
Right,
get into things like that, which they don't do a lot of the character examination for more, a couple more episodes after that of anybody.
Correct. But there's a lot more.
But you're attached to these characters, and you want to see what they're doing.
There's a lot more characters to build on in Star Trek. So you're not just talking about 5 people, which they can they can ambush you with background stories on those 5 characters in 2 episodes.
Yeah.
They're talking about, I mean, there's like 15 characters that you'll end up meeting throughout this whole thing. And each one can't have its own episode in the first season or you're really going to get bored. So they had to do some main storyline stuff early to get through a bunch of stuff to make you engrossed in the show, not just knowing the characters. They got you to love the characters throughout the whole span.
Kind of like Stranger Things, maybe, or
Stranger Things is different.
Okay.
Stranger Things doesn't really do character examinations.
Okay, let me make another.
It's not that kind of show.
Kind of like Picard a little bit in a way.
Picard is built by the same people who did
Right.
Next Generation, so it's going to have that same flow. So, okay, so we'll get out of Star Trek because I can talk
Right.
about Star Trek.
Regardless, Star Trek I can understand because like hard sci-fi, because Star Trek a lot of the time is hard sci-fi.
Super.
Yeah.
It's not about the characters; it's about the questions.
Yes.
So like if you go to something like one of the Asimov stories, and you're examining things like the 3 laws of robotics and how they can clash with each other and clash with just reality, because like I mean honestly, like going back to shows that I think should have continued, Carl Urban, who's on The Boys, was in a show not that long ago that got canceled after 1 season. It's called Almost Human, where he is a human police officer, and every human police officer has to have an android partner, and he hates androids.
I remember that show,
Yes.
but I don't ever remember seeing that show.
I watched that show when it came out. It was really good. It got 1 season. No one watched it. And honestly, it was in the days where Carl Urban was one of my favorite actors and no one else knew who the hell he was.
Right.
No one knew who Carl Urban was until The Boys happened, and I have no idea why. He's been in a bunch of good
Which
stuff.
one's Carl Urban?
Carl Urban is Billy Butcher.
Oh, God, yeah. He is such a great actor, too.
Yeah, so the guy who plays Billy Butcher in The Boys, he was the main character from Almost Human. He was also Judge Dredd in the new Dredd movie.
Yes, he did a great job in the new
Dredd
movie.
Random, important for some reason guy from Lord of the Rings. He was one of the random family members that was like in charge of like the wall guard or something in somewhere. He looked like honestly. He was freaking. He was in Star Trek. He was in the new J.J. Abrams Star Treks. He was Bones.
Yes, he was.
Oh.
He's the doctor,
So,
yeah.
He Carl Urban's been in a lot of stuff, but he was in this like hard sci-fi show, Almost Human. And the thing is, if you look at the hard sci-fi questions that they ask in that show, a lot of it is very Asimovian style questions, and a lot of it is like. I find it strange that these days people will be really interested in things like self-driving cars. And I'll talk about how self-driving cars are a realistic future. They're coming in just a few years. And they don't bother digging into it and figuring out why all the people that are developing self-driving cars are going, you guys are crazy. This isn't coming for like 10 decades. Because they can't figure out how to do certain things like convince the cars how to prioritize things. Like if it gets itself into a situation where it cannot avoid a crash, it has to do something that it has to consider the optimal pattern to try and save as many lives as possible, and they have to figure out how to tell it to prioritize people. And like Isaac Asimov did a lot of that too, where he had the 3 laws of robotics. And he would put the robots in situations where they couldn't avoid breaking a law, and then trying to figure out what happens and how people react to it to try and fix it so the robots can go do stuff.
Well, like in iRobot.
Yeah. And the conclusion that, like, from the iRobot movie was the robot goes, I have to save... I can't do anything that kills people, but that's inevitable. Because doing anything will cause people to die when you can see everything.
Correct.
And so it has to pick the path that kills the least people, and the path that kills the least people that it can figure is take over the world. Mm-hmm. And when you that was not ever an actual Asimov story. It's not based off of the actual iRobot. It's based off of something closer to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
I'm gonna read that.
But
too.
it's an interesting question, but it's not an actual Asimov story. It's just based off of his 3 laws and an examination of that.
That kind of reminds me a little bit of... Okay, and I know I'm getting way off topic here. It kind of reminds me a lot of time of the conflict and plot. Granted, there wasn't much of one to begin with of the Mega Man games. You will never harm a human.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is the whole Asimov thing is, in the first story that he ever wrote, he gave the 3 laws of robotics, but he didn't do it as an if then. He did you can't kill a person. You have to do things that keep you from being destroyed, and you have to follow orders. But none of them were any more important than the others. So there's a robot on a colony, and they send the robot off to go see why this thing is malfunctioning. And the robot gets into the situation, and it just freezes, because once it sees what's going on, it realizes that if it doesn't move forward to fix this thing, all the humans will die. But if it does move forward, it will be destroyed, and it can't let itself be destroyed. But it also has to continue and tell everyone what to do, because it has been given an order. So it's just sort of stuck there, and anything it does breaks one of the laws.
So what does it do?
It just stands there. So they go out and try and figure out what happened to the robot, because it doesn't ever come back, and they realize that it's just sitting there in this giant logic loop, and it can't move.
Huh.
So the later Asimov stories do what they did in iRobot, and they prioritize the laws, and they go, this, if then, and then you can move to here, and they do it an in-sequence thing.
Yeah. That was very, very sci-fi, so I'm glad we actually talked about that. But, I don't know, we've talked about Star Trek, we've talked about a little bit about robotics and stuff like that. There's a couple other... I lump them into sci-fi. Battlestar Galactica, both new and old.
I mean, Cylons. I mean, that's a big question.
So, which one are you talking about?
I mean, especially in the new one.
The new one where the Cylons look like humans.
Yeah. So, I think it came out after the show was finished or something. The one of the writers said that we were eventually going to tell you guys that all of them were Cylons, and none of them just knew it. Some of them knew it and some of them didn't. And that was going to be their whole thing, that was going to be their big what does it mean to be a person sort of question.
Which is
because they
sci-fi.
were all Cylons.
Yeah, which is very sci-fi. I personally enjoyed the original. It was a little campy. A little.
The one where the Cylons were all look like Cybermen?
Yeah, they all look weirdly robotic, and I enjoyed it because it was very fun. It was one of those things that you grow up and you get to watch some things blow up, and it was kind of you got to see it on TV. You didn't have to go to the movie theater. It was kind of a fun action type TV show to watch. So then I'll move into very obscure, very, very obscure sci-fi that I bet you nobody in this room has ever heard of. Have you ever heard of Buck Rogers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the TV show.
Everyone's heard of Buck Rogers. The question is more, has anyone seen Buck Rogers?
I've seen
No.
every.
It's been a long time.
I've seen every episode of Buck Rogers because we used to have it on beta.
I did not see any episodes ever of Buck Rogers. It's just one of those things I've heard of.
I've heard of it too, yes.
It's like...
So it was another old sci-fi type campy, fun little things where things blow up and you got some action sequences and stuff like that. So it was another one of those. I enjoyed that. So I want to get into one of my other favorite sci-fi shows. I don't know how many people in this room has actually watched it, but Stargate.
It
I
has
tried to get
MacGyver in it.
Which they make some really fun innuendos about him being MacGyver.
And Stargate Atlantis has Aquaman in it.
I tried to get into it when I was younger. I don't know. I couldn't ever draw myself into it.
So what I enjoyed about it is because I've always loved Egyptian
Lore, culture, and
history, stuff like that. Like especially their religion, more like their multiple gods and what they were stood for and stuff like that. So they kind of made it a very fun little thing about their gods were actually aliens that were highly advanced in technology, and the pyramids were made as landing platforms for their spaceships. And
which I don't know how you land on one of those things, but
well, if you only knew.
What?
There was
You'd have to. Okay, so
there was a medieval torture device that worked that way.
the TV show stemmed from a movie, a Kurt Russell movie called Stargate. The TV show stemmed from that, and they just broadened the story of the Stargate lore, and it became very huge on the Sci-Fi Channel. It was actually run as a Sci-Fi original.
Mm-hmm.
So Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, and Stargate Universe.
Is it all with one central character or a group of characters?
So Stargate SG-1...
I think it's a God, what do they even call themselves? Like a
SG teams?
Yeah, it's SG team. So it's like it's
SG-1 is literally based around SG-1, which is their Stargate Team 1. So,
where do these Stargates go? I don't remember.
different planets.
Okay.
Well, okay.
different places.
Do you not know where? You can't control it?
Hold on. Yes. So
It ain't
Stargate SG-1 was a it was all within our own galaxy.
Okay.
So they had a 7-symbol combination from this ring, which is the gate. And once you dialed these symbols in, it opened to different planets. Well, the different planets were determined by the constellations.
What?
So each constellation and where it stood made a point. So to get a GPS coordinates, you just need 4. Is it 4?
Don't know.
For a standard GPS coordinate. It's a longitude, latitude, and once where they cross, that's
Was
it.
there ever a case where
Hold
maybe
on.
they weren't able to get back?
Hold on, shush.
Sorry, I'm so curious.
You're asking too many questions that I am about to answer.
Okay.
Okay, so longitude, latitude, and then minutes of
Right, so that's how you get on a flat GPS. Well, you're in space, so you need to find a point in space, so it's 7. So think of a 6-sided die, which is a square. Okay? So you have to have 1 for each side, so it knows where it's going. So where all 6 sides intersect, that's where you're going. But what's the one thing you need beyond that? Where you're coming from. Your point of origin. So you have your point of origin, your 6 symbols on where you're going to, and it opens a wormhole to that planet.
Interesting.
So they also talk about the science behind it, which is like you would understand this, the solar drift.
Yeah.
So their coordinates aren't exactly where they should be. So the computer has to track the drift of the world, like the galaxy itself. So they have to do minuscule corrections to get to the right planet to get a connection. So They have one address that they found over a cartouche in Egypt over this ring. One address. But it's missing a symbol. And they couldn't figure out what that symbol was. So they bring in this Egyptian guy whose theory the whole time was ships land on the pyramids as you know, the whole thing, the Egypt's whole thing was based upon aliens. Well, hold on, are aliens. Like, the pyramids were built by aliens.
I just got this meme in my head of that guy with that crazy hair going, aliens, just aliens. But okay, I'm listening. Sorry, I'm trying to piece it all together.
Okay,
I'm not
so
saying it's aliens, but aliens.
Right.
So, they bring in this guy to try to figure out why they couldn't get the gate open, but he was not told what he was there for. It's like, so we have this, and we want you to help us try to figure out what this last symbol is and what these symbols mean, blah, blah, blah. And he couldn't figure it out. And then he's like, I need more information on what I'm trying to find. So they showed him the gate. Okay? And then he's like, well, what does it do? And then they start to dial it up, and the thing starts to power up, but without that seventh chevron, they don't know, it won't open. So, well, he has to figure out what the point of origin, the seventh chevron is and why. So he figures out that there's a triangle, which is our pyramid, with one moon above it. That's our point of origin. Okay? Once they figured it out, they were able to connect to this other planet. They go to the other planet, they do some exploring, find other humans, they find weird animals. They have to fight a god, which is Ra. This is from the movie. This isn't from the TV show. So the movie, like I said, builds to the TV show. So
That might have been why I was so confused.
yes, you need to watch the movie to understand the TV show. So they end up having to fight this god. They end up fighting and about to lose, and then they end up sending a nuke to Ra and blows up his ship, so they kill Ra. But the problem is they couldn't find their way home because they couldn't find a point of origin. They couldn't find... They figured out their address to get home, but they need the point of origin to get the gate to work, to go home.
And they don't know what that is.
No, because they couldn't find it. And then they ended up finding it later, and then they end up going back home. Now, this planet that they go to, the doctor, Daniel Jackson... he ends up sending everybody else home, and he stays on that planet because he wants to learn more about the Egyptian culture and where it came from and blah, blah, blah. He ends up getting married to somebody that's on the planet. Stuff happens. A lot of things happen. And then the beginning of the TV show has him coming back from the other planet, and shit hits the fan, and it opens the seasons, and the seasons go from there, and there's like 10 seasons.
Do they ever explain where these gates come from?
Yes.
Okay. Do they explain why they were made?
The ancients made the gates for travel. Just to travel.
Interesting. Do they have a frequent flyer program too?
You're not funny.
Really?
But the thing is the ancients no longer run them. The ancients are gone. So Atlantis...
Hence them being ancient.
I was going to actually say that, but you beat me to it.
Atlantis
Really?
is a separate show that they end up finding an 8th chevron, which takes them out of our galaxy into a different galaxy. So that's the 8th chevron. Then they found a way to plant a 9th chevron, which put them on onto a ship traveling to a different galaxy from a different place on this weird ship that was really crazy cool, but that was Stargate Universe, and that did not last but a couple seasons. So Atlantis, I think, had 6 seasons. Stargate
And it has
SG-1,
Aquaman in it.
What?
It has, yes. So the guy who plays Aquaman, we all know him as
Jason Momoa.
Or, he was also the super sexy Dothraki from
Game of Thrones.
Before he got those roles in Game of Thrones, or even as Aquaman, he was a guy called Ronan something. I had his name a little bit ago, but he was what they call. He has his own backstory, but he isn't an original from Earth. He's actually from a different planet in the Atlantis realm. You'd almost it's so hard to explain without actually anybody else have seen the show. To me, it's one of those things that I got into it so deep.
I seem to remember you a long time ago really enjoying that show.
I love that show. I've gone through SG-1 twice. I've gone through Atlantis twice, and I've only done Universe once.
So
He even wanted a P90.
I do still want a P90.
I really want to sit down one day and
We should sit down as a group and watch Stargate the movie.
and the Next Generation, and I would like
As a random aside, I was thinking as I was reading the new Stormlight Archive book that came out recently. If I was going to cast, movie roles, Kurt Russell, totally want him as Dalinar. I think that'd be really neat.
Even old Kurt Russell?
Dalinar's old.
Ah, that's true. He is, and he would fit that role really well.
Kurt Russell's just badass in general.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you see Kurt Russell in the what is it, the Christmas
The
Chronicles?
Santa Chronicles.
Yeah,
I want to see those. I'm going to watch those. Probably
I've seen the first
tomorrow.
one.
What's it about?
I've seen the first one. So do me a
About
favor.
Santa.
Watch the first one
Why?
because I want to watch the second one with somebody, and I won't do it by myself.
Oh, okay.
That's the thing next weekend.
Well, we'll do that tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But I want to watch this. I want to watch the second one, but I kind of feel weird watching Christmas movies by
I've
myself.
heard it's really, 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 really good. I've heard that.
I heard the first one was.
Goldie Hawn is amazing, of course.
Goldie Hawn has a small part in the first one, but she has a bigger part in the second one, and I just haven't. Like I said, I can't bring myself to watch something like that by myself. Now, last year I watched the Chronicles with my son and my ex, so it was one of those movies. We sat down. It was late December. We just sat and watched it. It was pretty good. So anyway, any other sci-fi things that we want to talk about? I mean, there's plenty of sci-fi shows out there.
There's plenty of sci-fi. It's just a matter of figuring out where you want to go.
I think between
Right.
the three of us, this podcast could very easily, on the broad topic of sci-fi itself, this podcast could probably go on for 4 more hours.
But here's
of
the
us
thing: is
talking.
that no, it'd be mostly between the three of you, because again, I never really grew up with sci-fi, so I really don't have a very broad knowledge of it as much as you guys do.
Well, you need to get to reading.
We're gonna
I
have
know
a-
that.
I've been throwing books at you.
I know, and I have been, but it's just I
And,
You
you're, and,
both
you're, and,
been
you're, and
left
you're all
with
like,
me
stop
then."
throwing books at me. I have a concussion.
no.
You guys just need to read Dresden and be done with it.
I
and
have
then
finished the first book. I'm working on the second right now.
What'd you think of the first book?
Oh my god. It was amazing. Without spoiling anything, because I know my wonderful wife is working on it, I will say that as the writer got further and further in the book, I felt like I could see their writing getting better.
That's just in the first book. Can you imagine the rest of the series?
Especially with that, and I'm just going to say this, that elevator scene near the end of the first book, oh dear God, that was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, that elevator, man.
And then it just it just spiraled and kept getting more and more.
Yes.
See, I've already said too much. I'm probably going to have to
Keep
sleep
it
on the
back.
couch now.
All right. We can just make this a shorter one. I mean, we're right about at a time that I'd like to go ahead and kill it anyway.
Okay.
So we're going to go ahead and cut this one a little shorter. The last couple I know we've done, an hour and a half or so. This one we're going to cut down to about an hour. Quick, brain lost all function.
Recommendations?
Recommendations. And I have no idea why that word went in and then right out of my brain. Quick recommendations. Why are we starting with Tim?
Because I want to think about this because I could go on for a while.
Honestly, I've already said my recommendations. Really, if you want something that you're willing to see end after one season, then go watch Almost Human. It was really good. But if you're willing to see something that has a lot of gore and a fair amount of nudity, but still has a lot of really good sci-fi elements, Altered Carbon is really good.
Altered Carbon was pretty good. I've seen the first season. I couldn't bring myself to watch the second season, but I've seen the first one.
I'm going to have to look at that.
It's pretty good. I think you guys would enjoy it. Katie, I know you're not much into sci-fi, but you have anything?
Firefly, Serenity, Doctor Who.
That works. Yeah, because if you haven't seen Doctor Who and you're listening to this podcast, who the are you and why haven't you seen Doctor Who
Right.
yet?
On a technicality,
I mean-
to specify, when we say Doctor Who, you probably best to
I
start
got
at the
intro-
later ones.
Nick and I both got introduced to Doctor Who late, and
Yeah.
Starting with the Ninth Doctor.
late, super late.
Oh man, what could I recommend? Oh my god. Well, I'm going to try
Technically,
to
the
keep
Ninth
this short.
Doctor was the 10th Doctor.
Doctor Who, Firefly, Mandalorian, if you're a fan of Star Trek, Picard, Umbrella Academy. You know, I really like Terminator Genesis. The one where...
God, you're weird.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Genesis.
Is that the one, I think, where Arnold Schwarzenegger came back and like they redid and went through the first two movies? I think that was Genesis. Pretty sure.
I don't know.
No,
No.
wait, no. Are you talking about the one where Matt Smith is the bad guy?
Yes! Which one
That was Genesis. Dark Fate was the one after that.
Oh, Dark
where-
Fate was the one.
Dark-
Where they friggin' like, and it's not even a spoiler because it happens in like the first 30 seconds. They kill John Connor, and just be all like, "Hey, you know all those things you thought were important in Terminator? They're not.
Yeah.
We're moving on now."
I
And it's
haven't
like,
watched it.
great.
I
so
really was enjoying Genesis.
why am I watching this?
What else
So
could I
Sarah
recommend?
O'Connor and everything else doesn't exist.
Sarah Connor's still a character in the movie, but John's dead.
He's not the one that created Skynet, and it's no longer called Skynet.
Yeah. So
Well, anyway, I know we're trying to wrap things up.
Terminator.
Umbrella Academy.
Even I know
would
that.
recommend all of that. And I could go on more, but I won't. Oh, and Ghostbusters, just for good measure. May or may not.
Even I know that.
Anyway, Nick has no idea what he's talking about, so
yeah, he
we'll
threw
just
in
ignore him for
Ghostbusters
now.
at the
Usual.
end.
It's
So-
Guys, I
paranormal.
apologize. It's my husband. I'm sorry.
My
No.
thing is
Advanced technology.
my thing is that I have a
Nicholas.
lot of sci-fi.
You're done.
I have a lot of sci-fi I
You
could
could have
recommend
recommended
also.
Sliders and just moved on.
I do love sliders. That's a good thing.
Sliders is a good.
I
one.
didn't get to talk
Are
about
you
that
guys
one.
done talking?
No.
Good. Anyway, to finish out the episode, I will throw my recommendation out there. I do have a few, but I'm not going to say them all. If you are an old school Trekkie and want to try some new stuff, Discovery is pretty good. So is Picard. If you like old school, older drama with a little sci-fi, try Stargate SG-1, but start with the movie.
Okay.
But other than that, I really don't have much else. So with that, I'm gonna say
Well, honestly, if you also like Star Trek, The Orville, actually being a comedy, it has a lot of really good Star Trek type elements. And
I've never watched it, but I heard it was really good. But that's the one that's done by
Seth MacFarlane.
McFarlane, right?
Oh yeah.
It's basically a comedy version of Star Trek. But
Now I'll tell you,
what's funny is I've heard from a lot of Star Trek fans that it's better than all the new Star Trek stuff.
that's a possibility.
Like in terms of like being an homage and like sort of continuation of Star Trek.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Like I said, with that, I'm gonna say talk at you later.